What's up guys, and welcome back to the channel. Today we are going to be getting this all cleaned up today. This is our next project. We have a 2017 STI in, and he went ahead and brought us an engine to put in the car. So as you can see here, we have a brand new engine that he has assembled on a pallet, and that needs to go in here. So before we do so, this thing has been sitting for several months. I think he told me 10 months. So we're going to get this thing a good bath because it is freaking dirty. So we need to get this thing all cleaned up, and that's going to be what we're going to start the day off with. And as you can tell, this is later in the afternoon. Just finished up that Civic Type R, so we're going to be moving on to this. Not going to start this today, just want to get it cleaned, get it in the garage, that way we don't have to work in the smoke tomorrow. And as you guys can tell, we still have some pretty bad air quality around here due to all the fire. So let's go ahead and get this thing all cleaned up and get it ready to start working on tomorrow. There we have it guys, we got this thing all cleaned up. Now we can go ahead and begin work on this thing now that it's all clean. I'm gonna go ahead, get it tucked away in the garage for tonight, so that way we can close up, don't have to deal with any of this smoke. And then from there, we're gonna be getting that motor back in the car, which I just showed you guys is over here on that pallet right there. So we are gonna get that thrown in this thing tomorrow. So I will see you guys in the morning. What is up guys, and we are back in the garage today, and we're going to be working on the 17 black STI that we were just getting washed last night, and you guys will be seeing this all in one video of course. But we have the engine right here on a pallet. The owner went ahead and already assembled this engine. Obviously when you start this project like this, something I didn't assemble, I'm going to be not so much leery, but I'm definitely going to look it over and make sure everything looks right and correct, so that way we don't have any issues when you get it together. I did notice one thing, and I am going to show you guys. If you look here, we have obviously our wire harness up here. We have the oil feed of the turbo comes down and around, and you'll see they have it going right into the back of the head here. Now this isn't to talk down on them anyway, or this is literally just to show you guys for informational purposes, but this obviously doesn't go on the back of the head down there. That is a coolant port where this is. So I'm guessing when they had these heads rebuilt, they obviously probably took off the coolant port like, you know, normally they do when they rebuild these heads, and put them in a bag form. And not doing this every single time or every day like we do, they just got confused and went ahead and put their oil feed in the back of the engine here. Now this piece here is the factory oil feed piece. That actually should go up on the head up here where this bolt is blocking off that oil galley. So we're going to put that up on there. Now this being an FP turbo, this line actually goes over to this ABCS line here in that oil feed banjo. So we are going to need to change that, put that to there. Obviously correct this, because this would just feed coolant into the turbo, and that would go into the oil system, and that'd be all bad for a brand new engine. So we do need to get that fixed. Another thing I like to look at is if you have an O2 sensor here. I always pull these out when putting the engine in and out of the car, because it's so easy to damage these on the actual side of the frame there. So if you look, that's what we're going to be looking at here, just to make sure it's never been damaged. It does look like it's been bent up, but I don't see any damage when it comes to that right down there. So that's good to go. You can see they have an old plug here taped off, I'm assuming for their TGV deletes. So not too big of a deal. But moving along, we took this bracket off here for the AC so that we could put it on the engine hoist, and I run a chain, for those of you wondering, right off the front mount there's a 14mm bolt that goes into the front of the block, and then I'll run it back here, and you'll see, you know, this will be tough to see, But I have a 12mm bolt right in the back of the engine there, so it's literally just directly in the center of it, and that's how I pick up engines. So for any of you wondering, that is how. I do see some comments every once in a while about it. But taking another glance at this thing, it does look like everything else is pretty much the way it should be. I am going to just make sure when I'm putting this in to be looking at it, going over it, and that we don't have any issues. So taking on a project like this can be relatable to a lot of you actually. You know, if your car's been sitting for a long time and you haven't had a chance or time to get it together, we're gonna treat this like that, so that way you guys can see there is a bunch of parts in the back of the car that we need to get out and lay out and see exactly what we have. It does look like it is pretty smoky out, so I was really trying to stay away from opening up the garage, but honestly I don't think we're gonna have much of a choice today just because of the room. I'm gonna get all these parts out of the car so that way we can see what we have here. And I'll show you guys. Of course, it is locked. So let me unlock this thing so we can see what we have. And I haven't even looked back here yet for parts. And taking a look, we have, hopefully this thing will adjust the light. We have some intercooler piping there. Looks like we have this intake. I'm not too sure what's in the box there. Good news is we have a radiator. Looks like we do have an AC pump. They actually took the AC all the way off this car. I see an alternator. I'm guessing this is bolts that is left in these boxes. Yep, there's some bolts there. So we have a lot of stuff we're gonna have to lay out, see what we have, and then decide from there what we're gonna do and how we're gonna tackle this. So let me get all these parts out of the car, get them laid out. I'll put them on the table, and like I said, I think I'm unfortunately gonna have to open us up and just deal with the smoke today. So let's do that, and as soon as I get the table out and those laid out, I'll catch you guys up. So luckily I was able to get this all laid out on the table here without opening the garage. So this is pretty much normal for what I would see for anyone doing it themselves. So we have an intercooler piping, our intake, we have a radiator hose here, we have a coupler, we have a bunch of bolts in bags here that are labeled. So that's pretty normal. I could just go ahead and pour those in a box as I know where all those go. So that'll make it hopefully pretty easy. Hopefully everything's there that we need. There isn't too many parts here. So like I said, hopefully we have everything we need here. We do have an IAG competition AOS we need to put in. We do have a radiator there. And we have, this is what was in the car. So hopefully, like I said, we have everything that we need here. To start this off and what's going to be going on, we're going to address that oil line first, get that fixed, and then I think from there we're just going to get ready to get this thing in the car, and then we'll kind of sort it out as we go to see if we have everything we need. The car is obviously in the garage, backed up. We do have our power steering pump down there, so that's a good sign. Obviously our AC is disconnected. Not too big a deal, we can reconnect that. He is going to have to get that recharged though. Transmission wise, it's obviously there. There would be no reason why that would be gone. I see the starter there. That looks like it's still connected, so that's a good sign. And we do have our clutch fork and pin and a throw-up bearing there, so thankfully we have that. We will have to just obviously readjust that because that's not the correct way that's going in. I'm sure it was just there to sit there. And there's a downpipe on the car sitting there, so looks like we have the basics of it. We will find out. There are some things that are taken away and taken apart in different ways, like this. This is your battery terminal here. So looks like we're gonna have to find the battery terminal, and that'll be interesting. So we'll have to do that. I'm sure there's gonna be multiple things like that in this car that we're gonna have to figure out and find, and there'll probably be small stuff missing here and there, but the only way to find out is to get to it and actually start putting the car back together. As always, first thing to do, get this thing up in the air, get our transmission jacked up as well. We'll get that piece of wood out of there that they have sitting there. We'll get the transmission jacked up, ready to get the engine in the car. We're gonna fix that oiling on the engine and look over it while I have it out of here, and then put it into the car. We do have an IAG AOS, like I said, to put on this car, so I am gonna be addressing that probably before we put it in, because it'll be easier to do when it's out. This does have an FP red, I want to say he told me. Yep, so it has an FP red, 3-inch turbo in it. You guys know how much of that is my favorite. Thankfully he has already put that on, but we have a problem. I'm already seeing a problem, guys. Our wire harness is smashed right there between the manifold and that turbo inlet. Oh boy. Well, I think this thing is gonna get escalated. We're gonna have to go through it because I can't run the harness that way. If we run the harness like that, guys, there's a chance of wires getting damaged or hurt, because obviously you got to remember we have an exhaust system here, right? Obviously the turbo shouldn't move, but shouldn't and can are two different things. Obviously it's gonna have a little bit of movement there. There's a ton of pressure on that intake manifold down onto this turbo inlet because it is a 3-inch inlet. So I really don't feel comfortable running this wire harness between the inlet and the intake manifold. So we are gonna need to pull this back apart, run the harness. I like to run them underneath here because you can see there's actually, if this thing will focus, there's a hole right there that works perfect for it. So we need to readdress that. I need to reach out to him, let him know what's going on, and then we'll go ahead and get the scene in the car. So looks like you guys are gonna get to see more. Now, let's get to work. Now we got this set up correctly. You can see we have, this is what the coolant pipe looks like that goes to the back of the head there. It has a 17mm banjo bolt there. Obviously we put new crush washers on there. Got that all mounted up. Now normally this is gonna go from here up to the lower portion on the turbo right here. So we'll need to connect those two. And then for the oil feed line, you can see this comes from the turbo and around. This is how FP does it. It goes right into this ABCS line right here. So we went ahead, got that installed. I did go ahead and leave the bolt in the back of the head. It does have it's kind of like a copper washer. It's an aluminum washer behind it. Seals it off there. There's no real point to put in the factory piece here because it's just gonna hit the turbo anyways. So if you guys can see. So went ahead and deleted that. Just left the bolt in there that they already had in there, and now it'll work just fine. Now the next step is going to be addressing this wire harness issue. The turbo also looks like it's pushed back a lot, so I think we're going to end up having to look at that, because if you look at our oil return here, it looks like it's bent back quite a bit, so we're going to need to figure out what's going on here. I imagine the turbo just needs to go forward. That's part of the struggles you have with that 3-inch turbo inlet there. So let's get to working on this wire harness. Now that we got this intake manifold all loosened up and able to get this wire harness out, I had to remove the whole upper portion, which is going to be a ton of fun with this 3-inch inlet. These things are a definite pain. I'm going through, redoing a bunch of the wiring on it. If you take a look here, just look at how flat this harness is from being underneath that intake manifold there. And you know, if that would have been like that for a long period of time, no doubt in my mind that would get damaged. So I'm glad we found that. We're gonna go ahead and dress it, get it fixed, run it underneath this intake manifold, or sorry, underneath this turbo inlet here where there's an actual spot for it. Has plenty of breathing room for this to move and do whatever it needs and not get damaged. So I'm gonna go ahead, get that routed underneath there, and then we'll get the top of this back together, and I'll catch you guys up. Looks like we are running out of a little bit of battery here. We're doing a time lapse. So I am gonna plug in the camera, get this knocked out, and I'll catch you guys up. Now that we've given this camera a bit of time to charge, we are back out here. I did go ahead and hold off on progress so I could keep you guys updated and walk you through. I did get the intake manifold all back onto the engine. Everything's back. I left the harness pretty much laid out there. I'm not going to finish it till it's in the car to get it 100%. I did go ahead, hook up this coolant line to the turbo there onto the back of the head. I also went ahead and put the bracket up on the up pipe to the head there. And remember how I was talking about the turbo was sitting quite a ways back? It really does need this bracket, at least this one, guys. You don't have to run the other OEM bracket, but at minimum, this little bracket here is what I like to run on these Grimspeed up pipes or any kind of up pipes. They give it the stability and hold it in the correct spot. So we got our turbo moved up to where it should be now. As always, I have the bolts loose so that way this thing can lift and go over the transmission. He did mention that this was not aligned properly, so I do need to go ahead and finish getting that lined up properly. I'm gonna wait till we get this thing on the cherry picker there, and I did get that front O2 sensor out as well. So this thing's all ready to go in the car. I did get the car all prepped. Now some of you might not know what to do in this, so let's talk about what you got to do to prep to get an engine in the car. So obviously the car is up in the air. I did go ahead and remove the downpipe that was there. I've had luck of putting them in with the downpipe on, but it does make the job a lot harder. So no time, get that thing out of the way, and definitely helps you get the motor in. So I did go ahead and remove the starter there, unbolted it, moved it, the wiring over, got our coolant lines up top there, moved over to the side, so we have a nice clear spot here. Do need to go ahead and move the power steering over a little bit more so that way we have a straight shot. Moving along, jack up your transmission. Make sure not to jack this thing up too far. The pan that you use on the bottom of there can get damaged if you keep jacking and the transmission stops and bottoms out. So just make sure to jack it up, give yourself some room. The reason why we jack this up is it helps get the motor into the transmission before going into its motor mounts down there. So that's why we jack up the transmissions for these. I did go ahead and grease the ferrule bearing and where it sits. Got the pin in the transmission and the plug tightened. Do not forget to put the plug in the side of the transmission here, because if you do, well, you're gonna have a bad day. So putting the camera down here, and I'm sorry, I'm trying to get a view of that plug for you. So there's that plug on the transmission right there. That is the one you want to put in. If you don't put that plug in, then you have a chance of this pin coming out and it will actually break off this ear on the bell housing. Then you need a transmission rebuilt. So make sure to put that pin in there. This is something that is only on the 04 to 2020 STI, and the older WXs have that same pin style clutch system. So just make sure to do it. This engine bay is all ready to go. Now we just need to get the chain on there, get the cherry picker over, get it assembled, and get the engine on the cherry picker so we can get this in the car. One topic I did leave out there, I did go ahead and get the hood mounted up higher. Since we do have the intake manifold on the engine, we do need to go ahead and you can see there's bolt holes here. And I moved the hood prop stud there down a hole. They do this from the factory so you can have the hood up taller. That way we're not hitting the hood when we're trying to put the engine in. So if you do have an intake manifold on this engine, you usually 9 times out of 10 are gonna have to do that. So just a little tip for you guys. I'm gonna go ahead and get this chain on this engine, get it on the cherry picker, and get it thrown in. Now that we got our clutch aligned properly, everything's looking the way it should. One tip for you guys, this is very important for when you're putting in an engine, especially if it's your first time. You can see there's dowel pins here on the block. So on these, you want to make sure that you only have one set of dowel pins. So there's one there, obviously, and one on the opposing side over here. But what I mean by that is you want to make sure you don't have two sets. So there's obviously revisions here in the transmission for it. And sometimes what will happen is the engine will leave them behind and then they'll be stuck in there. So you're trying to put the engine in, you'll get really frustrated and you'll be essentially hitting dowel on dowel. And you know, obviously when you're trying to put the engine in, you're worried about having the engine all the way seated to the transmission before bolting it in, obviously. Well, if you have that going on, you're never going to be able to, and obviously if you're trying to tighten it together with a wrench, it's not really the proper way, and that is very important. That's what will cause issues. So make sure to check your transmission for a set of dowels and your engine, so that way you know you have one set of dowels for the car. And I do go ahead and put some lube on those guys, because that way they'll slide in just a little bit easier for you. So this thing's ready to go in, quick tick for you. Now let's get this thing in the car.
Living life up in the fast lane. Hey. Living life up in the fast lane. And I ain't slowing down, I ain't slowing down, I ain't slowing down. Living life up in the fast lane. Pedal to the ground, pedal to the ground, pedal to the ground. Living life up in the fast lane. Life, though you lemons, you just put them in Coronas, Coronas, Coronas. I've been working, I need that advance with the bonus, the bonus, the bonus. Ain't no thoughts about tomorrow, I'm just living in the moment.